see people coming in and joining. Thank you very much for being here today. We're about to get started. I'll just give people a second or so to get ready, and I'm just getting my windows arranged here. Okay, good. All right, let's get going. It's a very cold day here, first day of winter, I think, here in Berkshire, England, and I'm going to be talking about how to craft a brand voice that will make your marketing shine, unlike the sun today. I am going to start by introducing myself and Articulate. I am the founder and CEO at Articulate Marketing. I have helped companies, and we have helped companies for more than 20 years define their difference engine, build their brand voice, communicate with their customers and prospective customers. We do branding, websites, content, and automation with HubSpot. So that's where we're coming from. There we are, me and my lovely colleagues. Small but perfectly formed. Little plug to begin with. If you would like to have a conversation with me about anything that comes up today, I would be delighted to do that. There isn't a live chat because I'm doing this on my own. I've got no producer support, nobody to answer questions or whatever for me. So I'm just transmitting, but it is happening live. Anything could happen, live theatre. So if you would like to book that, articulatemarketing.com/meet. That's my calendar. You can just book a time with me. I really will be delighted to meet you and talk to you. If you want to email me and ask me a question, matthew@articulatemarketing.com. And here is Frans Banningkop from Rembrandt's The Nachtwacht, The Night Watch. I always think he's the guy on the left. I always think he looks a little bit vague and sort of not sure what's going on, and somehow he's in charge. Occasionally that's how I feel, so I thought it was appropriate. We're trying to put the art into Articulate, so these are new style slides where we're doing quite a lot of Dutch Golden Age style artwork. This is, I mean, these are actual Dutch Golden Age pictures. Some of them we've had generated with AI. This is the Market Square and the old church in Haarlem, where my family come from. And it looks like that today. It's quite wonderful. Anyway, I've got a couple more webinars coming up later this year. If they're interesting to you, please do register. I'd love to see you at them. Then also there's a HubSpot contact enrichment, segmentation and targeting webinar. If you have anything to do with HubSpot, that's going to be really useful. And I've got a more broad thought leadership article webinar about thought leadership. Getting quite meta there, coming up just before Christmas. And after the 11th of December, I'll be taking a little break and restarting the webinar program in January. So that's coming up. So let's get right to brand voice. That's what you've turned up for. Thank you very much. What is brand voice and why does it matter? Well, brand voice is the personality and worldview of your brand. It's your brand attitude in words. Tone is how you flex that voice depending on the context. So a website page, a homepage, an invoice, an error message on your app. These are all different expressions of your brand voice, and you might adjust the tone somewhat to fit that. So it is brand voice, half of copywriting for your business. It is the how you say it. What you say is messaging, proposition development, positioning, and obviously subject matter expertise, product information, that sort of thing. It's the content, but the brand voice drives how you say it. There's a saying in Silicon Valley that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, brand voice is how your culture shows up on the page or on the screen with the written word. I also would say that the ability to react to and implement a brand voice, among other things, is one of the differences between copywriting and writing. And just because everybody can write doesn't mean everyone is a writer. And this is a really common misunderstanding about what copywriting is. It isn't just wordsmithing or producing words efficiently. It's about the ability to marshal this tone of voice and direct it. If you buy me a beer or book a meeting with me, I'll tell you some of the other differences between writing and copywriting. Okay. So why does it matter? Fundamentally, it helps you differentiate your business. It helps you humanize your content, especially as there is a rising tide of Me Too, blah blah slop from AI, and everyone in the world has a blog now. I remember when I was first doing blogging and content marketing for Microsoft back in 2000, 2001. They were like, oh, a blog, that's exciting, tell me what a blog is. And now everybody's got a blog. It is also a mechanism for engaging, and I did a webinar a few weeks ago about widening the mid-funnel and really getting the brand voice right for that engagement on your website for people who are coming in and already interested and ready to engage. Getting the brand voice right is really important at that mid and bottom funnel stage. But fundamentally, in a crowded, competitive market, it is very hard to build sustainable product differentiation. If you have a breakthrough innovation, your competitors will copy it at some point. And of course, only one company in any given market can be the cheapest. So building a differentiated brand is critical for everybody else. It's how you compete. And building a sustainable brand voice that connects with your potential customers is probably the cheapest and most effective way to build that kind of differentiation. I have a stat here for you. Edelman LinkedIn did a B2B thought leadership impact report, and they reported that 70% of B2B decision makers say they are more likely to think positively of a company that produces high quality thought leadership consistently. And I think brand voice is part of high quality. Yeah. So that's why we have built brand voice and copywriting in a brand voice into the heart of our difference engine methodology. Okay, let's move on. How do you find it? So we at Articulate have a comprehensive process, and here is a diagram showing you lots of steps that we go through to develop a differentiated brand strategy, and typically also with a logo design and a visual identity, and a content strategy, but also brand voice. So we're thinking about things like interviewing, brainstorming, workshopping, desk research, competitor analysis. These are all inputs into brand voice, and I'm not saying you have to go through all of these steps to do it. I think having some kind of brand voice documentation and definition is better than having none. But just to show you that it is complicated and it can be done to a very great degree of detail if you need to. So I would start with brand voice. Oh dear, sorry, that image is not the right one for this slide. Oh well, just so you know, there you go, live presentation. Let's think about readability. I think a really easy way of differentiating your copywriting from most B2B brands out there is by getting the writing concise, non-hyped, factual rather than sort of or objective, shall we say, and making it scannable and easy to digest and shorter. So a lot of readability stats look at sentence length, word length, strong verbs versus complicated verbs, $10 words versus $1 words, avoiding the passive voice. The Norman Nielsen Group did classic research into readability and the impact of readability on website, what they call usability, but in fact recall and persuasiveness, and credibility. And they say that if you are concise, scannable, and objective, you can increase the website's usability by 124%. Well, what they mean is you can make your website almost twice as memorable, credible, engaging. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Of course you want to do that. Most, not all, but most copy for B2B tech companies is not readable, or it's readable to some degree of readability. We run a scan when we do a marketing strategy session. I run a scan on websites for prospects, and it's rare that fewer than 50% of the pages have good readability. It's rare. Most websites have more than half the pages are difficult to read. So, why would you do that? Anyway, so start with that. Then I think the next thing, and at the highest sort of point of the pyramid for brand voice, is cop and attitude. Start with a viewpoint. Start with an opinionated stance, and it doesn't have to be a controversial or a challenging or difficult one. It's just important to say this is where we are. So we did a project for a client who was a sort of smaller consultancy, IT consultancy, and they were finding themselves going up against these really big consultancies, Accenture and Deloitte and people like that. And they wanted to work out what they needed to do with their website, their brand, their content, their copywriting, to look like they were valid competitors with these big companies. So we did a lot of work about what big consultancies do. And one of the things that we found, again, buy me a beer and I'll tell you some of the other things we found. One of the things we found was they have a really, really clear attitude, and it's usually can be distilled into 1, 2, or 3 words. And what my colleague Madeline Saunders, who did this work, I think she could now be shown a piece of copy from these companies. I mean, it would have to be crafted like something from one of their core website pages and tell you which company wrote it, because these attitudes run through the copy like letters in a stick of rock. I suppose if people are joining us from the US, they probably have no idea about what a stick of rock is, but it's a suite in England where there's lettering that runs through the whole thing. Anyway, next thing, engage people in the conversation. We find it's very interesting to talk to customers and to talk to people in the business about what they think the brand voice is and what they think it should be, and also to talk to executives and senior stakeholders about what they think. And they often are a little bit out ahead of where the rest of the company is and where the customers are. Well, which is natural. They should be leading the charge. So we do these exercises, and I've just pulled out a couple of these sort of word games. We ask people in a workshop to choose one or the other, and sometimes they're quite hard to choose because you want to be both professional and friendly. Maybe you do. It's a little bit like these sort of skills finders tests, or what's your personality tests. We're trying to get you to indicate one way or another. To some extent, the choices are less important than the discussions that they provoke, and the debates and the differences between where you are now and where you want to be. As an aside, I like the Disney versus Looney Tunes choice. I have to explain that to people. Years ago I used to design computer games, and we had a day with Charles Carney, who was the official historian of Looney Tunes. We were designing a Looney Tunes game, and he was saying there's a huge difference between Disney people and Looney Tunes people. One example of which, and there's an article on my website geekboss.com if you're interested about some of the others, but one of which is Looney Tunes people say, "Oh, that's all, folks." And Disney people believe everyone lived happily ever after. It's a really nice distinction. And if you're wondering what the difference between righteous and just is, Superman is righteous, but Batman is just. Okay, moving on. With a brand voice, you also have to think about who your tribe is. Who are you writing for? And that means doing the work for personas. Really doing the work for personas. It doesn't mean writing lots of blah blah about demographics and where they went to school, how old they are, how many kids. Well, that might be relevant in a consumer context, to be fair, but in a B2B context, probably not so much. And I love this example of how you can be misled by demographic details, right? And the late, great Ozzy Osbourne has a lot in common, or had a lot in common, with the then Prince Charles, now King Charles. And yet they're obviously very different personas with their very different needs, goals, passions in life. So it's important to go beyond the cliches of a persona and really start thinking about what they read, what they like, what their problems are. If you can talk to them, it really helps. I've spent a long time working for one of our clients called Clover, and know them pretty well, know their products pretty well. But in the last year or so, I've been doing hosting a podcast for them, and talking to their customers for the podcast has been absolutely eye-opening. It's really, really interesting to understand who these people are and what they want to do. So get out there and talk to people. I think this is my last point about some of the positive things that you can be doing to craft your brand voice. I think picking an enemy can be very helpful for brand voice, right? All marketing is targeting, and good marketing is positioning yourself against, some. You can elevate a brand a lot, especially if you're an underdog or a small player or a disruptor or a new entrant to the market, by picking your enemy as the number one player in the market. Those people are terrible. We're different because da 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 da. So I picked these examples from Virgin, Marmite, and Avis, where their brand voice and the words they're using in these adverts absolutely comes from their positioning and their differentiation against the market. Either perception of people who don't like Marmite or British Airways or Hertz, without actually naming them. Well, Virgin names them, of course. Okay, so you don't have to, but picking an enemy can be fun and helpful. What are the problems with brand voice? Where do people go wrong? Well, there's quite a lot of things that if you can just avoid these mistakes, you will have a better brand voice than all your competitors, right? The first one is focusing on you and what you do and your product, rather than the results, outcomes, benefits, and impact it might have for your customers. So always be benefiting. What's the thing that you deliver? My former colleague Claire once said that the secret of selling technology is not to talk about technology. Features don't sell. Instead, solving problems, making dreams come true, that sells. And you have to kind of address the psychology of change if you want to sell. Selling fundamentally is a sort of a form of therapy that says, look, if you do this thing, your life is going to get better. I think the epitome, the perfection of this thought process is Apple's 1990s Think Different campaign, where they were also positioning themselves against IBM and IBM clones. Back then, companies were talking about speeds and feeds and sort of processor power and things like that. And Apple was talking about, look at these people who changed the world. Think different, right? Think different. Just wonderful. And that's they did it beautifully with design, with illustration, with the advertising. I remember being in the Bay Area at that when this campaign was running and seeing these wonderful posters and wonderful photos on billboards on the side of the freeways. But it is also verbal. Think different 20-something, 30-something years later is still in the sort of the micro, in the cultural environment, whereas I don't know if anyone can remember an IBM or a Microsoft advert from the 90s. I shouldn't say that, but Anyway, right. This is where this image actually should be. You don't want to be the cocktail party bore who just talks about him or herself, right? People find that incredibly boring. If you ask people questions and you engage them and talk to them about their issues in their language and what's interesting to them, they think you're terribly clever and interesting, even though you're not saying very much about yourself. So this is Matthew's cocktail party will be that person. And I like that quote that I showed you earlier from Jason Fried about the difference between here's what our product can do and here's what you can do with our product. So fundamentally, your goal here isn't to please everybody internally by getting your messages out in your brand voice. That might be in the content, it might be in what you say, but it's to be unmistakable and trustworthy for the right customers and talk to them about what is important to them. Start with why, to quote Simon Sinek. Another thing that I think people often fall into is the man in the mirror or woman in the mirror fallacy. This is the assumption that the people who you are selling to are like you, have the same motivations as you. And when I say you, I mean, fundamentally the leadership, founders of B2B tech companies, are interested in the same stuff, read the same stuff, want the same level of technical detail. It's so common. And I mean, I probably talk to a couple of hundred business owners a year, and I have done for more than 30 years now. And they're very, very excited to tell you about their business and about their product and why it's awesome. And they sort of assume that everybody that they want to sell to has the same excitement about that. Well, the truth is they're not spending time looking at your product that much. They're not really, you might get a few minutes on visit on your website, whereas you might be obsessing about your product or service day in, day out. They don't buy your products or services for the same reason you created them. Their motivations are different. And you might need to be an expert to deliver your work, but they don't and shouldn't need to be an expert to consume it. So one of our jobs as an outsider, as a consultancy, brand experts, is to go into companies and just show them a different mirror, show them a different picture, show them these are your customers, these are the kinds of things they care about, these are the kinds of things you want to be talking about, these are the points that you can use to differentiate yourself from your competition in the eyes of the people who might choose to buy your stuff, rather than we've got this feature, this product, this stuff. Here is, and the most common manifestation of the man in the mirror problem is, if I give people enough technical detail and enough product features in enough technical language, they must choose us. And that approach in most cases will not work. It's not, because that is not the kind of information or the kind of presentation or the kind of language that the people who are going to make the buying decisions actually need to hear. So, avoid the man in the mirror fallacy. The next fallacy or problem, the pitfall that people fall into, is the smooth pebble. It's often manifests itself in workshops and brainstorms as, can we just be professional? We want to be professional. Professional, folks, is not a tone of voice. It's not a differentiator. I'm not really sure quite what it means, but it's the brand voice equivalent of the word solutions. It's a bit sort of generic and comfortable, but not actually meaningful. So you need to be a little bit angular. You need to be a little bit uncomfortable for some people in order to be very attractive for your ideal customer. If you try to please everybody and you try to be strong everywhere, you will fail. And I really like this expression, MEA, most advanced yet acceptable. This is the job of consultancy like us, is to show people what advanced looks like, what a really distinctive brand voice might be, what a really avant-garde logo might be, what an amazing differentiated website might look like, recognizing the gravitational pull of, we want to be professional, we don't want to alienate anyone, we don't want to take the risk of losing a prospective customer by sort of giving them a vibe that they don't like. But if you don't stake out that claim of being advanced, you end up starting from acceptable and retreating to boring. Most advanced yet acceptable. Push your boundaries before you accept the compromises. And part of that means making sure that the hippos in the room are on board with the process and willing to play the game. So, you want to avoid the hippos. This is the phrase, highest paid person's opinion. And I've been in workshops where everybody has sort of contributed a bit, and then, whoever's in charge says, I want this. Or I've also been in projects where we've got quite a long way down the road, and then some hippo has come in and went, no, we need to be more professional. And it's very frustrating. So everybody has to sort of agree, we are going to try and move the state of the art here. Okay. For what it's worth, at Articulate, we've been through this process ourselves. It's very hard. It's like doctors who smoke or shoot, cobblers' children. We don't take our own medicine sometimes. And we arrived at the attitude, reassuringly human, ruthlessly efficient. Now, everyone in the company was totally on board with reassuringly human. We quite liked that. That sounded nice. Ruthlessly efficient, if you set aside the sort of homage and nod to Monty Python, actually almost a little bit sinister. It's a little bit, but what we're trying to communicate there, and what we're trying to drive some change in our perceptions and our practices, is around project and account management, actually moving towards being increasingly efficient, increasingly process driven, increasingly organized, increasingly confident and competent, as a complement for that creativity and humanity that we want to bring. So it's aspirational a little bit. It's definitely advanced. I probably was pushing a bit harder as a hippo in the room than some of my colleagues were willing to concede. We probably had some more extreme versions of that, but that's where we got to. So we've kind of eaten our own dog food. And it's built on 3 platforms for us, which is Human, Expert, and No BS. And if you want to set up a call, I can talk you through how we did it and what we did and how we got there and what it looks like. I'm happy to share a copy of our brand and tone of voice guidelines if anyone emails me. So last slide, got a couple of minutes left. How do you document all of this? Well, if you have got a brand voice and it lives in the mind and the head of your chief marketing officer, you don't actually have a brand voice, you have a risk. What you need is for everyone to be lined up and able, willing to use it and consistently using it across the whole brand. And I would say also, if it's page 28 of a brand Bible that was prepared by a visual branding agency, that is also not a brand voice. That's a sort of add-on, adjunct to some other project, which is also important. I wouldn't diminish that in any way, and we do that too. Those visual identities too. But it needs to be something of some substance. But I would rather you had a 3-page brand voice document than a 0-page brand voice. Right? I'd rather you had something that you'd considered and done deliberately than something that had evolved organically or was just resulting from whatever people felt or wrote at the time, or whatever was the last thing that you produced. So you kind of need to have examples. You need to have these this attitude, these pillars. You need to talk about benefits and reasons to believe. You need to have a little bit of a messaging platform in there. I think you can get away with, look, we use the Economist Style Guide or one of these style guides for where you put full stops and commas and things. That sort of stuff is typically in a tone of voice or style guide, and we've got a 30-chapter internal writer's handbook that we use for that kind of thing to distill how we do it. But if there are idiosyncrasies or examples of things, the way that you do common things like emails or FAQs or something, put those in. If you've got really good examples of somebody who's written something and you thought, yeah, that's absolutely us, put that in the brand guidelines, the brand voice documentation, just to show people. Lastly, I think this is an experiment everybody should be running now. If you've got this documentation, you can put it alongside your ICP definition, your personas, your business mission statement, and all these sorts of really well thought out and structured documents into a custom GPT in ChatGPT, or into tools like Grammarly or whatever you're using, and have AI be an editorial assistant. Now at Articulate we do actual live pair editing, we do real editing, but if you're writing in a brand voice and you want to ensure consistency, making those tools available to act as a second pair of eyes, an objective and neutral sort of reviewer, can be very helpful. Now, don't just do whatever ChatGPT says, but if you inform ChatGPT with your actual considered brand voice documentation, it will help. It will help, and it's a way of scaling this and making it more consistent. So we're experimenting with that and delivering a beta version of that to our branding clients now. Okay, so that's the end of the formal talk. Again, do please get in touch, Matthew at Articulate Marketing, or book a call with me, articulatemarketing.com/meet. Would love to hear from you. Let me know if you like this, if you want me to do more like this, what you did like, what you didn't like. Any feedback's welcome. I've got a pretty thick skin, so if it's not constructive, that's fine too. But on that bombshell, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for joining. I can see there's quite a lot of people in the room, and you're leaving now. Thank you. I really appreciate you turning up. If you're watching this at home afterwards, thank you for giving me your time and attention. Have a great evening now. Bye bye.